Hello everyone, my name's Charles. I produce music under the name Sovryn, and today I'm at DBS Institute in Bristol to talk about bootleg remixing. Let's have a look at we were just looking at the bass, so we'll carry on that side. I think it all starts around here. That sounds a little bit better. I have a fairly standard processing chain, which I use for most of them. It's kind of rinse and repeat, but then change it where it needs to be done. So I'll just go through it once so you can see what's going on. I usually start off with an imager. The S1 I find to be the most reliable about actually, because it's not really, with bass, it's not about making it wider, it's about making it just sit in the mono, because the worst thing can be when you make a tune, you haven't really paid attention to the image, you play it out, and it's the mono system, and then all of your bass just disappears like that. It's the worst thing. So trying to get it mono, the mono signal there, can be really important. But again, it's just EQ, we've got some reverbs and delay, and everyone's favourite plugin, O.T.A, by the people who made Serum. It's basically just a really, really intense compressor. I tend to use that on the massive patches because Serum actually has an O.T.A built into it on the compressor when you do multiband. But so I tend to just use O.T.A on the massive patches. Again, it looks like they're all fairly standard. Yeah, nothing too exciting going on there. We'll go to the main bass. Oh, I didn't actually show any other project. Alongside that bass we were looking at, I actually had another layer, which was, it sounds, if I remember rightly, it sounds like it's just maybe a sine and a saw, just rhythmically, but that's to fill out the low content. I'd imagine that's quite mono, yeah. So that's just to give that low definition once it's layered. So you can hear it just adds that little bit of sort of 200 to 400 hertz. And there's not a lot of processing going on with that. Taking out the highs, bit of normal compression. So this is that main first sound. Again, same process. I try and do most of the work in the actual patch itself, truth be told, because it's, if you can do, I think we're inclined to think the path of least resistance can often be being lazy, but in music production, the more plugins you have, ultimately the more artifacts you can be adding, I find. So I try and do things in as little steps as possible to get there as simply as I can. Oh, we've got a distortion compression unit. This is a smaller version of that Camel Fat plugin, just on that bus. On that bus there, we have this erosion tool, which basically just adds a bit of noise. If I took that off. Again, it's quite subtle, but I think it definitely adds a bit more of a feel. And then these are the other connecting basses. But again, it's the same going on. I'd imagine I'm being quite disappointing from a technological point of view of using really intense techniques, but sometimes it's not required. My ultimate achievement actually, I think, would be to make a track which had as little to no plugins as possible. I think that's when you've hit the sort of peak of creativity, when you don't have to do all that processing and you've just got there with your source sounds. Build up. So I wanted to tease a little bit of the bass in the build up section. All I simply did for that is I used Ableton's recording tool, resampling tool. So I would simply arm this to be solos and arm that for record, and then you just record, and it would just record exactly what's going on here into this file, this little audio clip here. Oh, let me turn off the processing for you. It's exactly the same. And then I just added a chain, made it a bit wider. EQ. So yeah, that was essentially just adding some reverb delay for atmosphere as it's building up towards. We had the filtering, which is just bringing up allowing more of the highs to be played whilst also taking out the lows the closer we get to the drop. And then that happens again for the second one, but I used the alterations, I think, on the second drop. So I start with that one. So I just did that for this. Sweet. Now let's look at the actual bass bus. So here we have to start off with, I've monoed the bass from 200 Hertz and below. We've got trusty camel fat, which again is quite subtle, but if you take it off, it definitely makes a difference, which I will do now. In fact, I'll take it all off. That's it without the post-processing, but with, it just gives it that fullness. So yeah, we have the camel fat, which is essentially just distortion, but in a subtle and controlled way. SSL bus compressor, which is just a really, really useful bus compressor, and I've actually got it on the analog setting, so it's essentially giving some analog emulating signal, which can be nice to make it feel a bit more real. We've got a multi-brand compressor, which I just go through almost blindly with these sort of things. As much as you've got the parametric graphic in front of you, I find it's best to just turn off your eyes and just play and see what sounds best, because you can get very easily caught into making sure everything's how it should look, but ultimately we're trying to make sound here. And then just a limiter at the end. Thanks for watching, everyone. Really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I've been at DBS Institute in Bristol, and if you want to watch any more of their content, you can check plenty more out on their page.